Okay. So I want to revisit a topic this morning that's an important one that we periodically touch on, and it is pain versus suffering. And you've probably heard the adage, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And let me start by reading a section of the sutta from the Pali Canon where the Buddha talks about this. And it still amazes me that he had this insight 2,600 years ago that is as relevant, if not more so, today than it was then. And it goes like this. When touched with a feeling of pain, the ordinary, uninstructed person sorrows, grieves, laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught, so he feels two pains, physical and mental. Just as if you were to shoot a man with an arrow, and right afterward were to shoot him with another one, so that he would feel the pain of two arrows. So that's the sutta of the second arrow that I often refer to here. And I don't need to tell you that as we dwell and live our lives in these bodies, we cannot escape the physical sensations of illness, aches, pains, injury, and eventually even death. And even the Buddha himself talked about this. He experienced physical pain, and there are numerous references in the Pali Canon about him doing that. But suffering is different, and it's an important distinction, and it's one people often don't make. And suffering, as the sutta suggests, is what we add to the pain through our mental reactions, our clinging, our resistance, all that second arrow stuff. So he's talking about the difference between pain, which is inevitable, and suffering, which is optional, meaning that we have some agency there to deal with the suffering part. And it's deeply rooted in our physiology. Pain is as a protective mechanism for our bodies. But suffering, as he makes the distinction, and I think it's a really important one, is a different matter altogether. As the wise Buddha observed, suffering is our response to pain. And it's a response that can be altered and refined and worked with. And we do this, and this is what the practice offers us. We do it with our greatest self-awareness by responding to pain more skillfully, more lovingly, more compassionately, and more mindfully. So through our meditation, through our introspection, we can begin to transform our relationship with pain and lessen the burden of the suffering. It is through this thorough understanding and embracing of pain that we begin to free ourselves from the shackles of suffering. So let's take a deeper dive into this and talk about it. Let's be clear. Who likes pain? I mean, it is not fun. We go out of our way to avoid it, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, whatever, whether we're upset about something, whether we just slammed our finger with a hammer. Yet we suffer because we marry our instinctive and necessary aversion to pain with this deep-seated belief that our life should be free from pain. Therein lies the suffering. In resisting our pain, by holding on the belief that pain is this awful thing we shouldn't have, we just strengthen the very thing we're trying to avoid. When we make pain the enemy, we solidify it. And this resistance to it, and this may sound counterintuitive, but this resistance to it is where our suffering begins. If we break it down, there are really three dimensions to pain. There's the physical pain. That's the sensory part. It's like, ouch, that really hurts. The emotional component, how do we feel about that sensation? Oh, I don't like it. And then the meaning that we attribute to the pain. Okay. So take, for example, back pain, a pretty common malady. There's the physical component. It hurts. It limits my activities. And I'm going to have feelings about it. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. Have some despair. Okay, so that's the feeling piece. But then we may get depressed about it, and that's the emotional response. We create a story about the pain. We always talk about stories here. We create a story about it, and these stories are expectations. Oh, I shouldn't have this pain. Oh, why me? Poor me. Projections. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do anything. I can't work out. I can't go to the store. Blah, blah, blah. Fears about the stress of the pain. Oh, something really dangerous is going on there. Oh, this might be cancer. Eroding the quality of our life. We just load it up. We pile on. And that is the second arrow that the Buddha taught. He was so clear about seeing that distinction. And the good news is that once we see that and understand this distinction, we have ways to work with it based upon his teachings that can help us to some extent lessen the experience of pain by not piling on all that other stuff. It's not about reducing the sensory level of pain. That's a given. That's just what is. We can't avoid that. But it's the emotional and cognitive contributions to the pain which make it that much worse. And that's where we have some ability to really work. And very often when we do that, the sensory component changes. It doesn't go away, but it lightens or it shifts. In other words, when we change our relationship to pain by opening to it, by paying attention to it, by looking at it with curiosity. Oh, let me just explore what's going on here. Not running away from it, but really kind of leaning into it with mindful observation. We begin to really separate and see how our suffering arises from our relationship to the physical sensation of pain. On the other hand, when we meet pain with aversion, fear, desperate attempts to escape it, which is a natural inclination, it's not bad, it's just what we do, but we create these layers of mental suffering on top of the physical experience. But instead, when we meet pain with mindful acceptance, this is pain now, investigating it with gentle curiosity rather than resistance, something remarkable happens. The suffering begins to dissolve. We stop fighting with it. We stop telling ourselves catastrophic things about it. Oh, this is terrible. This is awful. I can't stand it. Oh, this could be really serious. I better go to the emergency room. Simply put, when we intentionally bear witness to the pain, rather than catastrophizing about it or distancing ourselves from it, it just becomes another experience. It's not a pleasant one. But we just see it for what it is, a sensation. There is a knowing that it is not pleasant, yes, but this interpretation that it is killing me, that it is ruining my life, all the emotions, all the stories that go with it, that's the second arrow stuff. And when we begin to see that and say, hey, there's the second arrow. Oh, I get that. Look what I'm piling on here. I have a headache. I go, oh, I can't get anything done today. This is so terrible. Why do I get these headaches? It just makes it worse. And I get obsessed with it. I focus all my attention on it. I feel like I can't get anything else done. So when we see pain as yet another of life's experiences that can be simply known and recognized most of the time as impermanent, not always, but most of the time, can be met with kindness and compassion, we can begin to let go of all the stories that we tell ourselves. This is the whole basis for Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction, is separating the stories from the experience and the sensation. And he has had amazing success over the years treating folks with chronic pain. Because remember that pain is in the body. It is physical, it's sensory. Suffering is in the mind. And by understanding this distinction, we begin to free ourselves from unnecessary suffering, even in the midst of life's inevitable pains. We have to be mindful of this distinction because this is the true path to reduce suffering. And that's what we're all about here. So that is pain versus suffering. So let me leave it there and let us talk about this distinction.